Hello and welcome back to the Undercurrent Stories podcast, where we dive deep into the hidden depths of our world, one fascinating guest at a time. You may have heard various accounts in the news this year about new discoveries of dinosaurs and their lives. There's been a lot happening. One man who's at the forefront of dinosaur research and can tell us much more about these discoveries is paleontologist Schmitt. Armin is also an author, and he brought his first book out last year, This World of the Dinosaurs. Hello and welcome back to the show, Armin.
Thank you very much for having me, Bob.
Well, it's great to have you on again. And I think it was about 10 or 11 months ago that you were on the show.
I believe so, too. I think it was just rounded about the time when I published the book. It came out in November last year. It must have been around that time when you invited me to introduce my book for the first time.
Yeah, it's been really interesting looking at some of your channels where you're explaining what's happening. And I have to say, it's been a really big year this year, hasn't it, in dinosaur news?
Absolutely. And it started off with a big headline from the UK, actually. And this is something that we might want to talk about today, because there was a big discovery in Oxfordshire where they found a huge trackway of dinosaur footprints. And then they did an excavation last year. And we agreed to talk about this topic. And coincidentally, they continued this year. And even after we spoke, they uncovered even more footprints from the same area.
Yeah, well, I'm really looking forward to hearing that. And the other one we're going to talk about is the sauropod, where there's been some other very interesting stuff that's been learned on that.
Absolutely. So then we're traveling across the globe on the other side of the world, to Australia, where we have found the gut content of a sauropod, of a long-necked dinosaur, for the very first time. So this is really spectacular.
Yes, it sounds exciting. And I think those are two big things that we can talk about. Otherwise, we'd be here all day talking about everything.
Yeah, I think we have to cut it short because there's so many things that happened. And we have to pick one or two topics. We can't expand on everything, but it has been a big year, and there have been a lot of discoveries in China, Mongolia, in Argentina, in Spain, Portugal, in the US, in Germany, and the UK, everywhere.
Yeah. So for any listeners that may have missed the previous episode that we had out at the beginning of the year, would you be kind enough just to give us a very brief background to your life growing up and what sort of got you into the into your, what developed your interest in dinosaurs?
Yeah, so a lot of people ask me this, and I honestly cannot entirely answer the question because it's been such a long time. I've always been fascinated by dinosaurs, and I think it was not very spectacular. I saw a book about like science and nature, and there was like 2 or 3 pages about dinosaurs, and I was like 5 years old. I couldn't even read it, but I was so intrigued and fascinated by these creatures that I had never seen before. And they didn't look like any of the animals that I knew from other books. And this has captured my imagination and my fascination ever since. And I've never let go of this amazement and fascination.
Well, thanks for that. And so let's get cracking. Let's talk about the dinosaur tracks in Oxfordshire, because I think that's something that most people have probably heard about. What's the significance of it?
Yeah, so this is really exceptional because we find dinosaur footprints all over the world, but we hardly ever find long trackways where we can monitor the movement of one particular dinosaur over a long distance. And this particular trackway here is the longest in the UK and probably the longest in all of Europe even. There are some tracks in Germany near München, which are also very well preserved and very long, but this is like an active quarry and not all of the footprints have been excavated, and we believe that they will continue if we were to remove the overburden, but this has not been done, contrary to the trackways in Oxfordshire, where they've been doing a massive excavation last year, and they continued during a 7-day period this year, and they have found, for example, one trail that extends 220 meters, which makes it the longest continuous trackway ever found. So this is really fascinating.
So just to be clear, when we say a trackway, we're talking about the actual journey that a dinosaur took and
That
left.
is correct. So we
left
have
his track or her track.
Yeah. So just to give a little bit of context, so this must have been the shore of a lagoon sometime in the Middle Jurassic, about 166 million years ago, and the beach was like a sandy beach, wet, and the dinosaurs, which were long-necked dinosaurs, were really heavy, really massive. And so they sunk into the ground a little bit and they left these footprints. And one of the animals was walking, and we have been able to follow this one animal for 220 meters. So we see continuation, a number of trackways, footprints that were created by one individual.
Do we know what type of dinosaur it was?
Yes. So this was a long neck dinosaur, and we believe it must have been something like a Cetiosaurus. So this is the very first long neck dinosaur that has been scientifically described, and it was described in the UK. So we've known this dinosaur for almost 200 years now. And so now we've found the footprints of this animal, and we can learn about its behavior and its movement. And it's not only this one particular trackway that we find in this Oxfordshire quarry, but this is the longest one. We've also found several others, and I believe there's 4 or 5 sauropod trackways, and there must be at least 2 theropod trackways. So these are tridactyl footprints of meat-eating dinosaurs that may or may have not hunted the long necks. And they can be attributed to an animal that is closely related to Megalosaurus. So, and this is also obviously a UK dinosaur, and it was the very first dinosaur that has been scientifically described.
In terms of its actual journey that it took on this track, is it a straight line? Does it go in different directions? Is there any way of finding out the type of speed it was doing?
Yeah, so there's about 200 footprints that are crisscrossing this plane that has been carefully removed from overburden. But the tracks themselves, they are fairly straight. So they do not go in curves or something. You must imagine that these animals were really massive and very heavy, and they probably moved quite slowly. And they were not making any rash or hasty movements. They were just trying to get from one place to the next and waste as little energy as possible.
And what type of Sorry.
Yeah. So they need a lot of energy, and they need a lot of food every day. And because they're so massive, they need a lot of energy just to move around. And if they were to just playfully walk around with no purpose, then they would lose so much energy that it would be hard for them to replenish their requirement.
Well, what type of weight would a long neck dinosaur like that be? Is there any way of getting an estimate for it?
Yeah. So it's actually quite difficult because there's a huge error bar, but we're talking about an animal that must have been 4 or 5 times as heavy as an African elephant.
Wow.
So we're talking about like a 20-ton, maybe even more, animal. So these were really massive giants.
Yeah. And this was found in Oxfordshire, and you mentioned that it was likely to, the situation, the actual area itself is likely to have been a lagoon, and obviously we've got a different climate at that time in England. What type of environment would it have been then? Would it have been tropical? Would it have been a jungle? Can you just describe what it would be?
Well, that is a very good question. So I think this has not been finally researched. I know that this year there was a micropaleontologist, Professor Christy Edgar, and she was collecting actually microfossils from the site. And we can see that these are marine invertebrates like clams or shellfish, all kinds of things like that. And they will tell us more about the climate. The dinosaurs are not very good predictors of climate, but in a broad, very general way, we can say that it was fairly warm, fairly humid, was more of a tropical climate, not the weather that we see in the UK today.
And would it have been a saltwater lagoon, do you think?
I think so, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is like a marine. So this was like an ocean. It's
Right.
not like a lake or something.
No.
Yeah. So
It
was probably hypersaline too. So it was like a very hostile environment in the lagoon, because of the hot sun. And we see a similar environment in southeastern Germany in the Solnhofen limestone, where we also have lagoon settings, and there we find very delicate fossils with skin and feather preservations of the earliest birds, such as Archaeopteryx, and they're only slightly younger. So the Oxford trackways, they're about like 166 million years old. as I mentioned, and the lagoon sediments from the Solnhofen limestone, they're around 50 million years old. So they're both Jurassic, but the one in Oxford is Middle Jurassic and the one in Germany is Late Jurassic.
And for people that don't know an awful lot about paleontology and the study of it and excavating sites and finding these animals, what type of technology and tools would a paleontologist use to study these tracks?
Yeah, so it starts very unremarkable because first of all, you have to remove the overburden, and then you have to have heavy machineries like excavator, things
So
like that.
the overburden being the clay or the soils
That's
and
right.
above,
That's right.
yeah.
So you remove the soil with an excavator, maybe,
Yeah.
and then you have shovels and brushes to remove like the dirt and the gravel from the indentations, which are the footprints themselves, which is manual labor. You do it by hand, and you need a lot of volunteers. And we had a lot of volunteers in this situation. There's like dozens of people who helped excavate these footprints. But what makes it interesting is when you scan the environment, then you have like this photogrammetry technology where you take hundreds and maybe even thousands of pictures, and then you run them through a computer program that creates a 3D model. And then you can actually measure like each and every footprint with precision, like with millimeter precision. You can measure like the width, the length, the depth. You can measure like the distance from one footprint to the next. You can measure the width of the track from the left to the right foot. And then you can make a lot of predictions from that. And you can actually calculate the body mass of a dinosaur from the depth of its footprint, which is
Wow.
really mind-boggling.
Yeah. So what are the main findings from this? I mean, we hear a lot about this particular finding of the Oxfordshire trackways. What have been the main findings, and is there anything that is extremely significant in terms of sort of progressing our knowledge of dinosaurs?
Well, that is a tricky question because I'd be probably insulting some of the colleagues. As I said, so there's micropaleontologists who study like um, the, the, the the surrounding environment. And for them, the footprints themselves might not even be the most exciting thing, but to understand what the climate was like, what the fauna was like, what the food web was like. So this is an important thing. Other paleontologists, other colleagues of mine might find it interesting to see how these long-necked dinosaurs interacted with the theropods. So we can deduce some behavior from the tracks. I'm not saying that we can analyze the whole situation like a crime scene, but we can at least say, okay, so there was an interaction and there was potentially a hunting situation of a large meat-eating dinosaurs hunting very large long-necked dinosaurs. So this is something that we also can study. And then other colleagues of mine, they want to understand the speed of a dinosaur. With the footprints and the hip height of a dinosaur, if we know the approximate size of the dinosaur who created those footprints, then we can calculate the speed with which this dinosaur was moving. So this helps us to understand something about their metabolism. If they were like actually um, active like mammals or more like crocodiles with a very slow metabolism. So these are things that we can find out. And it would be very arrogant for me to say that one is more important than the other. It is a whole potpourri of information that we gather, and all together they will paint a very good picture of what the Earth looked like 166 million years ago.
Yeah, it's amazing and very interesting and fascinating what this is teaching us. And obviously, though, this particular discovery is still being investigated.
Yeah, and,
More
and
to
the
learn.
fascinating thing is so they continued this year, and so the longest track they just stopped excavating because there's like a lot of overburden, but they will come back over the next couple of years, and there's a big chance that this track might even be longer than what we already see. And if we continue to do that, to excavate there year by year, hear that the manager of the quarry has been very supportive. So I think there will be an ongoing excavation over the next couple of years, and we can expect a lot of papers that come out from this study. And then I'm very excited to read what the whole picture is telling us.
What what's put in place to, I mean, you mentioned there's a quarry there. I mean, I've got two questions really. So the first one is it possible for the public to view it? And is it going to be something in the future they'll be able to do? And the second one is, what provision is put in place to protect the tracks for
Yeah.
the
So
future?
this is, thank you for asking this. So this is very important. Paleontologists are always dependent on private collectors and private people collecting at the seashore, finding fossils, reporting fossils. So there is a cooperation from professionals and hobby collectors. But with this particular instant, this is a private quarry. There's no access for the public, but we do need helpers to help us excavate. So the people who are interested in excavating at this particular site, they might want to reach out to the University of Birmingham or to the University of Oxford, both who spearhead this excavation there, and then they can apply or ask if they can be a volunteer, and then if they want to help and if they want to see these footprints, they could enlist in like programs during the summer where they do excavations and things
Oh, well,
like
that's
that.
excellent. So if there's any listeners that are interested, if they contact those universities, they can go
But
from
I have
there.
to be honest, I do not know the selection process. Maybe they already have enough volunteers, but I know that they always take some enthusiasts and they're happy to share this, but they want to make sure that there's not some nut jobs that
Yeah.
actually destroy tracks.
Yes.
There was an incident, I think, last year, which was really devastating. There's a very, very famous track site in Texas, in the United States, in Biloxi, of the Biloxi River. And there's also footprints from long-necked dinosaurs, and they've been known for like over 100 years. But there's some creationists who try to destroy the tracks so that it's conform with their religious ideology and does not contradict any creation or anything.
Yeah, yeah.
So they actually attack these sites and they destroy the sites, which we cannot allow.
No.
It's a very unique fossil site.
Yes, I can understand why there's a selection process. Well, thank you for telling us that. Have I missed anything on that recent discovery that I should have asked you, or you'd like to talk about, Armin?
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's like a nitty bitty fact just for people to understand like how massive these footprints are. So one footprint of a long necked dinosaur has about a diameter of about 1 meter. So that's 3 feet. So that's massive. So
Yeah.
so it's like a little bathtub. You can bathe a little baby in this, right? So
That's massive, isn't it?
but yeah, so we have to be curious, and if I ever get the chance to be reinvited, maybe in a year from now or 2 years from now, we can actually read some of the papers that are currently being produced. We don't know. Well, we know, but there has not been a lot of data published as of yet. But we can expect this to happen in the coming years.
Okay, thanks for that. And the other interesting discovery we'd like to talk about, which I think listeners will find really interesting, is about the sauropods.
Yeah, so we're still stuck with the long-necked dinosaurs. This is also about sauropods, but it's on the from the other side of the world. We are talking about a sauropod by the interesting name of Diamantinosaurus from Australia. And for the very first time in almost 200 years, we found gut content of a sauropod. And even though we've long speculated and we've deduced what sauropods ate, we never found physical proof of what they ate. But this is now the very first time that we actually have the food of this dinosaur, which is just amazing.
That is a really significant discovery, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we know what, and everybody who's seen Jurassic Park or who's ever looked at a dinosaur book, even for children, you can see long-necked dinosaur munching on some grass or some conifers or some water plants. Some of these ideas are actually false because we didn't have grass during the time of the dinosaurs yet. But we at least know that they were herbivorous and that they were plant eaters. And now we can see that they actually were not very picky with their food. So this particular specimen had plants from high-level trees and also low-level brushes and ground plants.
So it sounds like anything that was in its way
Right. So yeah,
Its neck will
because
go and eat it.
yes, absolutely. So we know that because of their huge size, and Diamantinosaurus was no smaller than what we spoke about, Cetiosaurus. So it's also in this 20-ton range. So this dinosaur had a massive food requirement, and we can estimate that they ate anything between 400 kilograms and 1 ton of food every day. And so they couldn't be very picky. So they just ate whatever they could reach, and then they were just munching away like all day.
So the discovery itself, what was it? Fossilized plant material or tooth wear patterns or something else?
Yeah, so we find plant particles, shreds of conifers and seed ferns and angiosperms. So, angiosperms that are flowering plants. These are modern plants, so to speak. And they were actually new by the time Diamantinosaur was around. So they were not around during the Jurassic when Cetiosaurus walked along this lagoon, but this Diamantinosaurus lived in the mid Cretaceous, in the late Albian, early Turonian age, about 101 to 94 million years ago. And so this was the very first time that we actually see these angiosperms evolve. And right away, the long neck dinosaurs started eating them. But they also still ate from these large conifer trees. And what we find is fossilized gut content, which is called collolyte. And this collolyte is preserved in a very hard concretion inside of the body cavity of the dinosaur. And because of the very unique mineral content or the mineral composition of the sediment, this was only able to be fossilized, because otherwise, because of the plant matter, they usually do not get fossilized. But this very particular situation allowed this to get mineralized. And then we find conifer pinnules, angiosperm leaves, and seed fern fruiting bodies. So, and all of this was eaten by the long necked dinosaur.
It's amazing stuff. How our human understanding of it's current. Just to rewind a little bit in terms of, we talk about these periods that the dinosaurs lived in. The universe was formed about 13.2 billion years ago. How long ago do we know that how long ago does our understanding say that the first dinosaurs came into existence? And how long ago did they finish?
So we know that the first dinosaurs appeared sometime during the mid-Triassic period, and this must have been around 230, maybe 235 million years ago. There are some finds in South America, Argentina, Brazil, that hint at an earlier evolution, but then it's always difficult to discern what is a true dinosaur or what is an ancestor of the dinosaur. Because if we look at the earliest dinosaurs and the earliest crocodiles, they look a lot alike, and they both belong to a group that's called the archosaurs. And the archosaurs, they eventually split into two groups. I'm putting this very broadly. In essence, there's like this dinosaur line, which contains all the dinosaurs and the birds, and the other one contains all the crocodiles and crocodilomorphs and crocodile-like reptiles from the Mesozoic. And so this split happened sometime after the Permian mass extinction, 252 million years ago. And there are some early dinosauromorphs that may or may not be true dinosaurs, maybe not yet dinosaurs. And we find them in Poland and in Argentina, and they might be 240 million years old, or maybe even 245 million years old. But right around that time, this is when the dinosaurs emerged, and then all the dinosaurs except modern birds went extinct 166 million years ago. So we're talking about a time span of almost 180 million years.
It's a long time, isn't it?
Insane. Yeah, if we look at the human evolution, the earliest Homo sapiens are maybe 300,000 years old. So this is like in order of several magnitudes longer than what we have experienced so far. And if we look at the civilized culture of humanity, we're talking about maybe 12,000 years. And so then this is like 80 million years. So this is just nuts.
Is there still the speculation about the demise of the dinosaurs, or is it sort of widely accepted that it was caused by the meteor that hit the Earth?
Yeah. So there was a cascade of events that was triggered by the asteroid. Because of their very special biology, dinosaurs were unable to recover from the asteroid impact. And so even though some dinosaurs may have survived the immediate impact and the tsunamis and the earthquakes and the wildfires and the eruptions of volcanoes and all that, they could not reproduce fast enough or find food fast enough. And then within the next year, 50 years, 1,000 years, all the dinosaurs went extinct. So like maybe some dinosaurs were able to survive for another 100 or 200 or maybe even 1,000 years. But after that, all the dinosaurs were extinct except birds.
In terms of their breeding habits, does the DNA, I mean, I don't know if you take something like a Tyrannosaurus rex, for example, did they go around in groups? Did they travel a long way to select mates? Is there anything that sort of says there was any inbreeding, or were they quite diverse in terms of who they selected?
Yeah, absolutely. So they were diverse because we know around 1,000 dinosaur species, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. We haven't found nearly half or like 1/10 or 100th of all the dinosaurs that ever existed. So there must have been tens of thousands of dinosaur species that were around. And so because of that, and because of their global presence, and because of their different ecosystems, and because of this extremely long time period where the climate and the ecology change numerous times, we see different adaptations to different environments, to different habitats. And so some of the dinosaurs were solitary, but others, they were very abundant and they appeared in groups and herds. And we can actually see some social behavior in some dinosaurs, whereas in others, we believe that they would not care for their young. But there is a lot of evidence for many species that actually cared for their young and had actually very complex social structures and had tribes or groups or herds. At least for some species, juveniles and adults would co-inhabit a certain area for some time until the juveniles were old enough to hunt and care for themselves.
That's really interesting. And going back to the sauropods, are they, you sort of inferred there that they're fairly generalist in terms of what they eat? They're not particularly selective, or this particular one wasn't particularly selective.
Yeah,
Sorry,
sorry.
go on. You were going
Yeah,
to say?
we've suspected that for a long time. There has been extensive research by a group of scientists spearheaded by my former boss, Professor Sander in Bonn, and he has led this group of very interdisciplinary researchers who looked at all kinds of sauropod biology, and they already hypothesized that they were generalists and they didn't have the luxury to pick and choose what they ate because they had to eat so much that they just basically ate whatever they got their hands on. And so we can see, and this is very interesting with this particular specimen, we can see that the food that they ate were actually from trees and from ground plants. So they were actually not only feeding randomly, but they were eating from different elevations. So they had to lower their neck, eat from the ground, and then raise their neck and eat from the trees. So this is very important for us to understand, and we can see that they invested a lot of time and energy to just feed. So they spend most of their time feeding.
What's next for this area of research? And are there any other fossil sites or techniques that could give us even clearer insights into the diets of these giant dinosaurs?
Yeah. So this was basically a lottery win because of the high metal content, iron content of the sediment of this particular fossil site in Australia. Plants were only able to be preserved. Other areas where there's different sediments, we do not find this. So we cannot look for gut content or colloids. We cannot target excavation sites where we find this because the default is that we do not find any gut content. So as I said earlier, we've known sauropods for 200 years, and only after 200 years, this was the very first and only time we ever found colloids in a sauropod. So maybe this gives us an understanding how very rare this situation is. And we know more than 200 sauropod species. We've known sauropods from all over the world. We've known them from South America, North America, Asia, Africa, Europe, Australia, and nowhere has this been observed prior to this spectacular find. And this is why I wanted to talk about it, because this is so unique and this is so fascinating. And we try to learn as much as we can from this very particular specimen, but we cannot expect to find many more anytime soon. There may be more, and hopefully we'll find more, but this is not something that we can go out and look for specifically.
No. Well, it sounds like 2025 was a particularly good year for, certainly in the news with various findings, but it's a continuous process for paleontologists, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just amazed what we find, and some of the finds, like the gut content of this Diamantinosaurus, are things that I never expected to find ever, right? And just as a funny side note, a few weeks back there was a meat-eating dinosaur, a megaraptor from Argentina, and it was very well preserved. And we looked at the fossil, and we couldn't believe our eyes. And this specimen still had the leg bone of a crocodilian in its mouth. So this is this is insane. Um, and we don't know how it got there. It was not washed into the mouth, so this was not post death, but this must have happened while this animal was still alive, because we can see the teeth of the megaraptor sunk into the bone of this particular crocodile. So it actually bit this crocodile, and even in death, it wouldn't let go of the leg. So this is insane, and I would have never expected to find anything like that, but we did. And who knows what we'll find in 2026 or
Yeah.
2027.
If people want to go and find out a bit more about dinosaurs, obviously we'll talk about your book in a second. You're based in Germany and in the UK, but first of all, in the UK, where can people go? What sort of places can people go to actually find out a bit more and see replicas of dinosaurs?
So the UK is actually very strong in dinosaur research, and some of the best researchers, paleontologists in the world are from the UK. They're spearheading some of the most spectacular findings. And there's a whole slew of spectacular scientists, and I can only name a few. But some of the best universities to study paleontology in the UK would be Birmingham, Cambridge, Oxford. In Scotland, there's Edinburgh. They have very great professor there, Steve Rusati, who himself has also written several books and who was an advisor to the Jurassic World franchise. And obviously, there's Mike Benton in Bristol, who is one of the most well-known paleontologists of our time, who has written several books and who has done amazing research about coloration of dinosaurs, and can't even name all the things that he's done. And then there's fantastic research on Mesozoic marine reptiles in Peterborough or in Southampton. So there's a whole lot of places where you can actually study vertebrate paleontology.
And also there's, and we mustn't forget to talk about, there's your book. How's the book going?
Yeah, so thank you for mentioning it. So I've written this book, and shamelessly I hold it here. So if we do like
It's a
a
fantastic
scan,
book.
so
Yeah.
this is like the book. It's The Lost World of the Dinosaurs, which came out last year. And this is a book for people who are interested in paleontology, but do not necessarily have a scientific background. So this is like a popular science book. Everybody can read it. Everybody can understand it. But there are some technical terms in the book, but I try to explain them. There's a glossary, but also there's boxes within the text where I explain things like tsunamites, or I don't know, all kinds of things, trophic cascades, and things that people might not know at the top of their head. But all of these are explained, so you can read this text very fluently without necessarily knowing anything about dinosaurs. And hopefully, after you read the book, you will find out a whole lot that you didn't know before. But then there's also a second project that I'm very happy to announce, and I mentioned it in passing to you before our interview.
Yes.
I'm working on a children's book, which is very dear to my heart. This project, I've been writing on this book for over a year now. And the writing part is finished, and I collaborate with a extremely talented artist who is doing the illustration, and it's going to be a very big book for children age 8 years and older. It will have around 180 pages, and it will cover over 160 prehistoric creatures. Most of them are dinosaurs, but there's also some flying reptiles, marine reptiles, turtles, crocodiles, and it will be very detailed, and there's a lot of information, and also there's a lot of new dinosaurs. So about 1/3 of the dinosaurs that are mentioned in the book have been scientifically described only in the last 2 or 3 years.
Wow. So it's right up to date then.
Absolutely. So this is like the most topical children's book you will ever find on dinosaurs. And the nice thing is all the classics will be there. Of course, you cannot write a children's book about dinosaurs if you don't mention Tyrannosaurus and Triceratops.
No,
But
absolutely.
there's also new dinosaurs such as Lokiceratops, and all kinds of dinosaurs that people have not yet heard of. So this will be interesting for people to discover new dinosaurs. And if you read the book with your children, then you yourself will also discover a lot of them.
Well, what we'll do, we'll put all those links on. I know the children's book's coming out next year, but we put the links on the show notes, particularly for your current book.
Thank you.
And the links, because obviously you're coming up all the time with updates on your LinkedIn, on Instagram, TikTok. So I'll put those links on today. So it's been really great talking to you again after almost a year. Fantastic that you've been able to sort of distill down some of that news that we've heard in the media over the last 12 months. My guest today has been Armin Schmitt, paleontologist, author, and dinosaur enthusiast. And you can, as I said, you can find out more about Armin and his book, The Lost World of the Dinosaurs, in the show notes. Thank you for coming on the show, Armin.
Thank you very much for having me, Robert.